I want to talk about innovation, and before we do, I want to play you a clip from the 2011 North Shipping Conference. Roll the film.
Because I believe in the next 10 years, we're going to see new disruptive technologies that are going to make our business much different from the way we used to do business in the old days.
Jaakko, as somebody who deals in technology, I want to ask you, what new technologies will have the most impact on shipping in the next 5 to 10 years?
LNG.
LNG.
That's the first one.
That's the first one.
The second one is, of course, the efficient vessel. And now I talk about the vessel as such, and people were talking about ship design this morning, and that's the first thing to look at, the vessel efficiency.
Okay. From your standpoint, from the class standpoint, yeah.
Yeah, LNG for sure will be the first one. Energy efficient design, operation. I also believe in batteries, you will see more use of batteries in the next 10 years.
Walter.
Well, in addition to LNG and efficient operation, I think we'll see that the communication technology, the data transfer technology, i.e. big data called, will also enter the shipping industry. The need for surveillance up in the high north will also be important.
Andreas, your perspective.
I would echo all the comments that have been made. The other one, obviously, is LNG infrastructure, not just as propulsion, but also to facilitate the whole chain to flow into new and smaller markets than historically.
Well, LNG, of course, fueled engines are a very promising concept that would help cut emissions. How long before this technology is readily available and practical to use? Henrik and Jaakko. Yeah.
No, it is available. So it's available for we have gas engines, we have four-stroke engines. The ship that received the award today was the first two-stroke engine. They're working on another two-stroke engine. So the engine side is there. The tanks are there, the pipes are there, the safety systems are there.
The infrastructure, though?
Then there comes the infrastructure, but it takes a much shorter time to build the infrastructure than to build the ships. Yeah. So in Northwest Europe, we have the infrastructure. In the US Gulf Coast, we'll have the infrastructure. In Canada, it's going to be developed. In Singapore, it will come sooner than you can think, yeah.
Peter, your thoughts on the infrastructure, and Koji, you want to make a comment. Koji first, yeah.
When it comes to the innovation and the new technology, and I think the IMO's regulation will make a major role. And the EDI was really breakthrough regulations already adopted. We are now in the implementation stage. And that may cover, for example, potential of LNG as a fuel. The technology is there. But the problem is bottleneck of the fuel supply, LNG as a fuel. So therefore, it is some element of responsibility of government to ensure the terminal of ships will be provided with the ample amount of LNG. And the other point is we have adopted already sulfur regulations. But the problem is quantity and availability of low sulfur fuel. And this is a role of oil industry, and the government should push the oil industry to ensure the sufficient quantity of oil should be provided. So those are necessary part of infrastructure.
Peter, your thoughts?
Well, I would agree that the infrastructure is a relatively straightforward proposition, particularly in those areas where you have a lot of oil and gas infrastructure to begin with. The real challenge we face in the U.S. is helping the public understand the safety aspects of LNG, and that it's a much safer fuel than maybe it's seen to be.
A lot of, we talked about shale earlier, and of course LNG right now is the other holy grail. What will be the impact on shale in terms of LNG?
Well, clearly it'll provide a lot more gas. That's the obvious point. But I think just one caveat here is we've seen so many reversals in this business in the past. And what we still don't know is how much shale can be produced in other consuming nations. And the other one is if you get land transportation shifting in earnest to gas, how much extra demand is that going to create? I think we see some really strong movements in that direction in China, in the US. And so I think the business plan just has to be able to withstand surprises that even though I believe in LNG and I think it is a cheap and clean source of fuel for the future, don't be surprised if prices get inverted sometimes down the road.
Yeah. Walter, I want to ask you because I'm sorry you wanted to make a comment. Go ahead.
Well, I think although we all agree that there are some real game changer technologies around the corner, we're discussing shale gas. I think we shouldn't forget the fact that continuous improvement and hard work in the ever improving part of innovation is also important. And I think all industries, also the maritime industry, responds positively to challenges, whether these come from new regulations or new operational requirements. So I think the industry can do with some more challenges that will stretch innovation, and it will build innovation power, which is to the long-term benefit of the industry as a whole.
It's very interesting. Last night I was reading about a group called the Game Changer at Shell. And the head of that, Mr. Consfor, had something very interesting he said. I'd like to share it with everybody. Innovation is about learning from things that don't work and triangulating your way into what does work. Would you agree with that? And could the shipping industry do a much better job of working with other industries that it's not directly related to, not necessarily in terms of finding a solution, but how you approach problem solving?
I think so. We used to say that our most important technology is actually not a technology, it's a competence, and we call it systems engineering, which is how we put people together, how we define processes for working across the obvious borders. And I think that's an area where we have more to learn, more to do in the shipping industry.
Jaakko, you want to make a comment, then Henrik, I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
I think shipping industry definitely needs to work closer with other industries, but they are good examples, and I can talk about as an engine manufacturer. Of course, engines or turbines or whatever energy providers are very closely working with the energy industry, getting the power more efficiently to the industry. But let me get back shortly to the LNG, and I think there again the harmonization of the standards and of the regulation, building the infrastructure is very important, and there you don't see yet major steps.
Yeah, well, that's what was interesting to me. You all both seem to say it's so simple, so optimistic, but I agree with you. You're not seeing major steps at this point.
I would have said simple, but what I did say is I don't think it's a huge challenge, but the major steps haven't been taken, I would agree. And some of that, I would say in the US, is specifically related to public concerns over safety for LNG. So I think that you have to address the safety issue first and do so in a way that the public understands and accepts before you can move forward with infrastructure development.
I want to come back, if I may, to this question about innovation and how it's done, because I think it's always interesting to compare across industries. And if you look at aviation or you look at the automotive sector, how does that match up? I think, as I said, this morning's examples show that we're not sleeping in shipping. But one key difference, in aircraft manufacturing, you have two major players who can concentrate a lot of resources on developing the next generation with materials, weight, engines, and so on, and also just very few engine producers. In automotives, you have a dozen really big automotive companies which spend a lot of energy on the next generation and some engine manufacturers. And then in shipping, you have, again, fragmentation, a lot of shipyards. And one of the questions or challenges is how can we marshal resources in R&D and innovation so that we don't end up having it dissipated over many small yards, some big ones, but losing that ability.
This is a very important point you're making in terms of being a change maker, for especially looking towards the future and technology. That word came up more than any other word this morning, technology. Henrik, your thoughts on this, and then I'd like to get Walter, your thoughts on this, and Jaakko. Yeah.
Yeah, I think traditionally we have not seen the shipyards being very innovative. I think most innovations come from the ship owners and operators. They are really the ones who see the problems. And in all innovation, I think half the job is to see the problem. Yeah. Then the innovation will come from the manufacturers of the equipment and also from class. And as you know, we will merging with the Germanischer Lloyd. One of the very strong arguments is because then we can invest even more in R&D and innovation. And the two companies have exactly the same philosophy. And that is really one of the key points why we go together.
Yeah. Walter, further thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with Henrik that the close cooperation with the users, the owners, the operators is a must, and it happens all the time. I think the Norwegian Maritime Cluster is a good example of this. It's been like that for many years. So, but I think that the areas, in addition to what Henrik mentioned, the areas where we will see things happening is in, for example, predictive condition monitoring, surveillance systems for the Arctic that can predict roads and conditions on those roads ahead of you coming there, communication systems close to the ports, things like that. So again, a little bit back to communication infrastructure and also data technology. I think this is going to be of use.
I totally agree with the other panelists, and but I think it's very important that all the stakeholders they work together, and we have seen it lately. What comes to the new environmental products, whether it's exhaust gas cleaning or ballast water treatment or catalysts, that I mean there are forces who don't want to have it, there are forces who want to develop it, and there are forces who need it, and we should more work together.
Peter, you know, from a regulator standpoint, not your operational hat, but from a regulatory standpoint, you know, what do you think government can do to support more innovation? And
well, I think it begins by working globally, because you need global standards, you need global predictability on that, and then I think it's working collaboratively with industry. What we respond to best are the demand or drivers that I mentioned. So if the public demands change, if there's an industry that's changing, but what we do best in responding to that is talk to the industry about what they're doing. And then I think collaboratively you find out what are the engine manufacturers doing, what are the shipyards doing, what is the industry seeing as the trends heading its direction, and how can we best address it in a way that allows that to move forward, but still meets the needs of the public for a safe and secure environment.